Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Merricks Garage, rebuilding a GM Dana 60 Kingpin. As you can see, I've stripped it all down. It didn't start out like this. As you saw in my last video, I rolled the axle in here and the teardown began. Now I'm trying something a little bit different for this video. You guys have spoken and said, we want more detail, we want to see what you're doing, make the videos longer. Okay, here you go. You're going to see me struggle and curse and sweat as I try and break 30-year-old rust and corrosion off these knuckles and get them out. You're gonna see as I grind this thing down, there's a lot of effort and work that goes into these things, and I'll be frank, when I see the videos online that show the time lapse of people doing this stuff, I often feel inadequate because, man, I get stuck with one bolt and get ready to throw in the towel because I can't even get one bolt out. How am I supposed to rebuild the whole axle? Well, persistence pays off. I did get a lot of stuff stuck on this. It's a 30-year-old axle. It's gonna have some seized bolts and rusted and corroded parts. But where there's a will, there's a way. Heat, high impact, and big hammers, and you're gonna win the battle. So, I've got everything out of the axle. The gears are out, the axles are out, the knuckles, brakes, everything's stripped off it. I've degreased and washed it. It's gonna get painted, prepped, and loaded back up with all the goodies. But at this point, I wanna get my brackets from Off-Road Design all nailed down and perfect. I wanna get the Detroit E-Locker back in there with the ring gear and get everything set there. And then I think I'm gonna powder coat some of the parts that go on it. It's a big project. It's going fairly well. I spent this weekend tearing stuff apart. And I hope you guys will dig it. It's time, let's do this. I got some brackets to cut off as you saw in my last video, and we're gonna get started. I got this, let me get this situated here. I got this Zini plasma cutter. It's not a very expensive plasma cutter. In fact, you'll find it down below in my Amazon store, but for what I'm doing, I think it's gonna suffice. And it's relatively cheap. It's just another good tool to have in the garage. So today, my objective is to get these guys cut off. That one, that guy, and that guy. And once those are all off, I'm gonna start stripping the axle down, and hopefully we'll get the locker in today. We'll see, I got all day. It's the first time I've done a big day in a while, and I'm fired up. So, let's go. There's the garage. That is a broken Kingpin bushing. So I thought I might find this on one side at least. I thought it was on the driver's side, but nope, here it is. Good to know. If you don't have that special socket, you can always use this guy and it works. But you're probably not getting your bearing set properly if you're using this. So I'm gonna get the tool to put it back together. I have it somewhere, I just can't find it right now. I got the axle stripped out, I got the diff cover off and drained. I've got to pull the knuckles and cut off one more bracket and finish power grinding and getting everything smooth. A lot of dirty work today pulling everything apart, but it went well. I mean, it's never easy. It's never all that much fun when you're sweating and
cursing, but the end result is always worth it. Spent about as much time cleaning up as I did doing the work. But that's how it goes, and it's much better to come out to a clean garage the next day than to come out to an absolute mess.
Yesterday was a productive day. I got the high steer mount, the leaf pad, the spring mount all cut off and mostly buffed back down to the tube. I've still got to remove one side on over here. I was also able to pull the axles and brakes and hubs and all that out of here. I've still got to get the knuckles off. The knuckles are pretty seized on there. I hit them with some penetrating fluid overnight, so hopefully they'll come off rather easily today. I need to get a dial indicator so I can measure my backlash off of the ring gear right here before I pull that out and mark the bearing caps so I know what the orientation of those is. But yeah, we're making progress. The axles are out, like I mentioned. I'll show you guys a side-by-side on the axles today. And then what's the next step? The next step is throwing everything back together. Getting the Detroit E-Locker all in there and dialed down. And then welding on the bracketry. We're making progress. It's all good stuff. Hot, sweaty, tiring, but man, I love doing this stuff. I'm exhausted today. I haven't done this in a while and I feel like I'm out of mechanical shape. But I'll get back there. Let's go get it.
Okay, status update. The lower Kingpin bearing caps right here, right there, are an absolute nightmare. I guess 30 years, they haven't been replaced. They're seized in there. The press fit between the bearing cap and it's gotta be the knuckle. It's just legendary. I've heated, I've beaded, I've soaked. I'm trying to come up with all kinds of clever mechanical advantage solutions right now, but none of them are working, so I'm just going to use brute force and frustration and anger. I've got my Yukons on the left and the factory on the right. First and foremost, you're going to notice the difference in diameter of the shaft. You can see how you get what's called necking down of the factory shaft versus no necking down on the Yukons here. A larger yoke, larger U-joint. And once again, you'll see the necking down. It's very apparent right here. You can see where it necks down considerably versus nothing on the Yukon. And then moving down, once again, down at the splines, you'll notice that there is no necking down. Well, I guess there's a necking down to the bearing surface, but compared to the necking down that you're going to see right here. And then the spline shaft. 35 spline versus 30 spline. So there's a lot of advantages, and that's just, that's not even talking materials here. That is purely talking about the physical characteristics of these two axle shafts. You'll notice the just physical difference in the two, most notably down at the stub shaft and down at the spline shaft that goes into the locker. And then when we start talking about the metal, 4130 versus I think it's 1080, a dramatic increase in strength, torsional rigidity, elasticity, and hardness. So that's why I went with these Yukons. Great axle shaft. So that might not look like a ton, but stripping this thing down to the bare bones and wire wheeling every inch of it, and then I'm power washing, degreasing, and then I'm gonna acid etch and paint it and rebuild it. This thing's gonna be like a brand new Dana 60. Now, that's not always necessary. There's a lot of people who rebuild stuff that doesn't need rebuilding. So I'm gonna be using quite a lot of the old stuff, but my Kingpin bearings and bushings were destroyed. So I've had some clunks and noises in the truck for a while that I haven't been able to trace, and I'm hoping Some of them might be gone away. So this is my buddy Elijah, who came up from Camarillo to hook me up with his axle stand that he built. He saw me struggling, was like, bro, I got something to help you out. Okay. Before I go ahead and pull out the old limited slip, I need to measure the backlash on the ring and pinion. So I'm gonna hold the pinion stationary and I'm gonna move the ring gear to measure how much movement I'm getting between the ring gear and the pinion when it is all set. Because it's bolted down, I haven't loosened anything yet. So I've set up my dial indicator, you can see it right here, and I'll show you guys how to measure some backlash. And I now have another angle on the pinion, and you can see, there we go. So that is about 4/1000ths of an inch, which is, now I know what my backlash is set at. And when I rebuild this with the Eaton, I can measure it again and make sure that my backlash is the same.
So much like any selectable locker, you're going to have some direct connection to the locking differential inside the axle to control it. With the ARB system, you're going to have an air line. With an aux locker, you're going to have a connection, I think it's usually mechanical. With the E-locker, you got these wires. So the directions call for a 1/2 inch hole drilled through the housing. Now obviously this is nerve-wracking drilling into the housing, but it should be pretty simple. I'm hoping this metal doesn't give my bit too much trouble. But let's drill this hole and see what happens. That actually went a lot smoother than I had expected. Good drill bit, lots of oil, light pressure, slow. When it gets hot, I back off, but keeping the oil on it helps a ton. But that's the one thing I've learned from destroying about 63,000 bits. Don't let them get hot or you'll ruin the temper and the coating.
What the heck? That was heavy.
So on our way down south to hook up with a buddy of mine to TIG the brackets on. Just about killed myself getting this thing in here. I don't know why I didn't use the jack stand he made for me. I just didn't think it would roll as smooth as I needed it to out here, and I didn't think the axle was that heavy. But man, it is a heavy, heavy axle. And I guess putting that differential or that locker in made a huge difference because I'm exhausted. I'm getting old. Okay, let's get on the road, get that axle down there, get it tigged up, get it back up here, get it painted, get all the parts put back in, get it back onto the truck. Let's go drive over Priuses again.
Sunday afternoon, it's getting late, but we've had a successful day. I'm gonna show you guys exactly what we got accomplished today, but long story short, we got all the brackets welded onto the axle tubes. We got the tubes stripped down, cleaned off, prepped, and we burned in all those welds. They're nice and fat and hot. And I'm happy with how it came out. Elijah, my buddy over at Nocturnal Welding, did the majority of the welding for me. I have a small Hobart at home. I'm just not confident in both my ability and also the heat that my welder can put out to get through that ½ inch of tube. So it's super important. This is going to be the link between my axles, the ground, and my truck. So it is of critical importance that we have good penetration, good weld, good contact. And this guy got it done for me. So, boom.
The brackets are all welded on. I'm very, very happy about how these went on and went together. This is just such a time saver, not having to build these bracket boxes and figure out where my strike pads are gonna be and the angles. It just made things fly by. Very well thought out, very nicely manufactured, and super beef. So the axle is, as you can see, is all stripped down and ready to go back together. I got my Eaton E-locker in here and that's all set. It's wired up. So one of the final steps I do before starting to put everything back together is I degrease, prep, and etch the metal. I've been using POR 15 since I built my truck. I didn't use it on the axles last time, but I used it on pretty much every metal surface in my truck. I love this stuff. It's not cheap, but man, it's worth its weight in gold. POR, paint over rust, is a rust preventative that essentially just creates this super hard bond between the metal and the paint. There's multiple steps in applying it. You've got to degrease the whole axle, then you've got to hit it with their metal prep, which is actually going to etch the metal. Then you hit it with the POR 15 that will literally get everywhere. I've had it in my hair, I've had it in my nose, I've had it all over my hands and my arms. But this stuff is awesome. The only downside is it is not UV stable. So you have to apply a top coat to it, which isn't usually a big deal, just hit it with spray paint. But POR 15 actually has, they've got their own top coat now, which is what I hit this whole axle with. The finish is super durable. It's, in my opinion, the next best thing to powder coating, which I would love to do, but the axle is just too big and heavy and expensive. But POR 15, I'm gonna put a link to this in my store down below. Take a look at it, check it out. It is literally the best thing you can do for prepping your axles. Man, that may not have seemed like a whole lot of stuff, but man, that was a whole lot of stuff. I think that's what often gets missed when you're doing a rebuild like this, is the amount of work and time you spend on just the prep. I mean, heck, when we welded the brackets on the axle tubes, we spent probably 3/4 of the time prepping them before we actually burned them in. Welding took maybe 30 minutes. Everything else took like 3 hours. And that is the way these projects go. And I haven't really ran into any significant issues with this part of the build. I mean, yeah, I had some challenges with that bottom kingpin plate and things like that, but those were always gonna come up. As I move into the underside of the truck and putting in the bracing for the shocks and putting in the engine cage and doing all that, that's where I anticipate having some more quote-unquote fabrication work to do. But I'm looking forward to getting there. Having the shocks sitting on the axle behind me is just like, feels so cool.
Feels so good. Feels like progress. Feels like I'm moving in the right direction, and the project does not seem as daunting as it did before I undertook it. Granted, I still have a long way to go, but the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel is starting to become a little bit brighter. Hopefully, I will get another long video up for you. Let me know what you thought about the length of this video. Was it too long? Was it too short? Do you want more? Do you want less? You guys tell me what you want, and I'm gonna do my best to deliver, because you guys are the reason I'm doing this. And yeah, once again, I thank you guys for watching, giving me this platform and giving me this opportunity to share my project with you. I don't take it lightly, and it's a ton of fun. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave me a comment, follow me on Instagram, buy stuff in my Amazon store. Merricks Garage. See ya!